Well, thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you to the organisers of this event today. Thank you to all of you for attending this discussion. I'm just going to lay out a few facts about the United Kingdom that I think will answer some of Charlie's questions. Why are we experiencing a political realignment, a historic moment in British politics that will, at the next general election, deliver a reform government led by Nigel Farage? By the year 2063, white Britons will be a minority in the United Kingdom. Among the under 40s, that will happen as early as 2050. By the year 2079, people born outside of the United Kingdom and their immediate descendants will represent a majority in the entire United Kingdom. By 2100, the end of this century, 1 in 4 British adults and 1 in 3 British children, unless we change the current direction, will be following Islam. Today, in 2,000 schools in the United Kingdom, a majority of children do not speak English as their main language. Across the United Kingdom, 1 million people, according to the census, do not speak English. Mohammed is the most popular name among children. All of these things give you the answer as to why British politics is in a state of flux. We have an immigration demographic crisis which nobody in Westminster is responding to. And that crisis has 2 key pillars. The first is the illegal migration crisis. According to the Pew Research Centre, we have an estimated 1.2 million illegal migrants operating in the United Kingdom, living and working in the UK today. They are being joined by nearly 200,000 additional illegal migrants arriving on the small boats crossing the Channel from France. Once they have entered the country illegally, they are then being distributed, dispersed by the Labour government. They are being put into the heart of our local communities, next to families, next to schools, next to synagogues, next to children. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what they believe. The cost of that dispersal is £5.7 million every day to the British taxpayer. If current trends continue, by the time of the next general election, another 181,000 illegal migrants will enter the UK illegally. They include, for example, the recent case of an Egyptian asylum seeker, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was convicted of making bombs in Egypt, entered the UK illegally, was then put in a 4-star Hilton hotel at the expense of UK taxpayers, was allowed to roam the streets of the UK for 17 months while the government decided whether or not to grant his asylum request, during which time he walked into Hyde Park, London, and raped a woman in that park. I could sit here and give you 100 similar cases to that. The illegal migration crisis is making a mockery of the United Kingdom's claim to be a self-governing independent, sovereign nation, and it is breaking the social contract between citizens and their democratically elected politicians in Westminster. It is being compounded by the legal migration crisis, which began with Tony Blair in 1997 and was then accelerated by the so-called Conservative Party. Most recently, under Boris Johnson, mass immigration, mass uncontrolled immigration was put on steroids. From 2021, nearly 4 million legal migrants entered the UK under Boris Johnson's liberalisation strategy. 80% of all of that migration came from outside of Europe. 80% from Nigeria, China, Uzbekistan, India, Pakistan. It has fundamentally reshaped the country with no democratic mandate. Nobody voted for that. Nobody asked for that. It was not in any party manifesto. In fact, Boris Johnson promised the opposite in 2019 when he said he would lower the overall numbers. And he did the opposite. To give you a sense of the scale of demographic change in the United Kingdom, I'll give you one fact. In every single year since 1997, in each single year since 1997, there has been more immigration into the UK than there was during the entire period between the Anglo-Saxons in the 5th century and the end of the Second World War. In other words, there was more immigration in each year since Tony Blair came to power, including under the Conservatives, than there was during 1,500 years that separated the Anglo-Saxons from Winston Churchill. That is the scale of change we are witnessing. We have seen more immigration into the UK in the last 4 years than we have seen since records began in 1701. Again, nobody voted for this. Nobody asked for this. The Westminster class will say it's making us richer. It's making us stronger. The evidence on the economics of immigration is now clear. From Finland to Denmark to the Netherlands, and even now the United Kingdom, the Office for Budget Responsibility all say the same thing. The exact kind of migration that we now have in Europe, low wage, low skill, poorly educated, non-European, is making Western economies weaker, not stronger. It is a net fiscal cost. It is not a net benefit. It is imposing enormous costs onto UK taxpayers during what is also the worst cost of living crisis that we have had since the Second World War. The economic problem is one thing, the cultural problem is another. As we have also discovered through the rape gang scandal, the grooming gang scandal, which was the industrial scale rape of hundreds of thousands of British children by Pakistani Muslim gangs who got children addicted to heroin and alcohol and trafficked them from one town to another from the 1960s onwards. An estimated close to 1 million children were sexually abused and raped in this way. And politicians in Westminster said it was Islamophobic to suggest that that scandal was happening. And only recently was the Labour Party, under Keir Starmer, the Labour government, willing to give a national inquiry into that scandal to get those girls the truth and justice that they deserve. That is a symbol of the cultural problem that we have imported into the United Kingdom. It is not only an economic problem. We have imported cultures that are diametrically opposed to the traditions, the values, and the way of life that has traditionally held our country together. The reason millions of people are voting for the Reform Party, which is currently on 35% of the vote, the reason hundreds of thousands of people are marching in the streets, and the reason millions of people are raising the Union and St. George's flag across the United Kingdom as part of a spontaneous protest against their government, one of the most significant protests that my country has seen in many years, is because of the immigration crisis, which raises the obvious question, how do you fix it? How you fix it is you announce an immediate end to mass uncontrolled immigration. The United Kingdom will leave the European Convention on Human Rights. The United Kingdom will repeal Tony Blair's Human Rights Act, which entrenches the ECHR into domestic law. The United Kingdom will move to detain and deport anybody who enters the United Kingdom illegally, processing them offshore, not putting them next to British families, British children, British synagogues, British churches, in the heart of our communities. And the United Kingdom will establish the principle of national preference, namely putting the tax-paying, hard-working, law-abiding majority of British people first. That is what will happen over the next 5 years because of the failure of the Westminster class to actually deliver on the promises it has made to its own people. And while we are doing that, as you may have read over the last 2 weeks in Britain, we will dramatically reshape and reform legal immigration. You will no longer be able to stay in the United Kingdom indefinitely. We will move to a policy of 5-year renewable visas, which will only be renewed if legal migrants can speak English fluently to a high standard, make a net contribution to the economy through taxation and work, do not rely on welfare benefits and social housing that is subsidised by the British taxpayer at the cost of £15 billion over the next decade, and who work and contribute to the economy and have a clean criminal record. The legal migration regime will be completely reshaped. The illegal migration regime will be completely reshaped, because if we do not do it, the social contract in our country will collapse. People will withdraw support for the state, they will withdraw support for welfare, and we will head ever closer to what we saw in the aftermath of the Southport atrocities, which was civil unrest. Nobody wants that to happen. Nobody wants public trust in democracy to collapse. Nobody wants to live in a more divided society. But the answer to the current problem, which I think is a Europe-wide problem, is to regain control of the borders and regain control of the immigration system. And that is why British politics is facing the most significant reset for more than a century. This is the most significant political insurgency since the rise of the Labour Party in the early years of the 1900s. And the Westminster class, when they ask themselves, why is this happening? They only have themselves to blame. Thank you very much.